Lions are already in Charlotte getting ready for Saturday's game with the Panthers. Can they do it again? Plus, we talk Pro Bowl and more on a Friday edition of Locked On Lions.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? An early Merry Christmas and welcome into Locked On Lions on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day on a Friday, December 23rd into Saturday, December 24th. Lions and the rest of the NFL, well, there's some games on Christmas Day, but mostly everybody's going to be playing tomorrow. A Saturday game for the Lions in Charlotte at the bank against the Carolina Panthers. Panthers at 5-9, still clinging to hopes of winning the NFC South, only a game back of Tampa Bay at 6-8. In what is a terrible division. And here the Lions sit at 7-7, trying to get into the playoffs, trying to make it in as a wild card. And they got a good opportunity here with 3 games to go, all winnable games. Panthers, Bears, and Packers on the schedule coming up. Matt Dery with you. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day here on Locked On Lions. And of course, you can find us on Twitter at Dery Speaks, at Locked On Lions. Also the Matt Dery Facebook fan page, and what's up to everybody watching on the YouTube channel. Coming up on the show today, we had our crossover yesterday with Julian Council. More on the Panthers. We'll get into that. I have some thoughts on some Pro Bowl snubs, a player to watch for Saturday, and the bettors. People in Vegas really like the Lions, minus the 2.5. Some places have it at 2.5, some at 3 this Saturday against the Panthers. But exciting, certainly time. We're sitting here. Christmas is just 2 days away. And we're talking about playoff football, playoff possibilities, and all of that with your Detroit Lions. Who would have thought that at this time last year, or even at this time 2 months ago? But the team's won 6 of 7, 3 in a row, playing well, and now back on the road here tomorrow against the Carolina Panthers. Lions traveled on Thursday. Hope everybody is okay and safe. We had some snow here, certainly. It's still going on. It's not Death Storm 2022 by any stretch, but lots of wind and cold, and the Lions were smart. They got out of town on Thursday and got to Charlotte a day early, going through a walkthrough on Friday in Charlotte, which is usually a travel day. And then they'll play on Saturday on Fox. Our buddy Chris Myers, along with Robert Smith, will be on the call tomorrow for the 1 o'clock game. For those of you that watched the crossover yesterday, you heard Julian Council talk about the Panthers and what the Lions and Lion fans should expect from Carolina coming up tomorrow. It's not a very good football team. It's a team that started the year hoping that Baker Mayfield was going to be the answer to their problems at the quarterback position. That didn't work out. They went to P.J. Walker for a little while because Sam Darnold was hurt. P.J. Walker, whom actually beat the Lions a few years ago, also kind of fizzled. And now they're at Sam Darnold, a quarterback. They've traded Christian McCaffrey. They still have DJ Moore as a pretty darn good wide receiver and some decent weapons and some running back kind of by committee with Foreman and Hubbard and some of these guys. Taylor Moton's a pretty good tackle for them. But all in all, when you really look at what this Carolina Panthers team does, they don't do anything great. Brian Burns is a Pro Bowl player, made the Pro Bowl, 10.5 sacks. He can get to the quarterback. Derek Brown, who many fans wanted the Lions to draft a couple of years ago, is a pretty good D lineman. But it's an iffy secondary. It's a very mediocre team. And it's a team this past weekend against the Steelers at home got pushed around by a very mediocre Pittsburgh offensive line. Steelers ran for close to 160 yards last week. Najee Harris did whatever he wanted to do in this game. And the Carolina Panther offense wasn't on the field much because the Steelers really controlled the line of scrimmage. So what I'm looking at for tomorrow is to see the Lions run the football and get back to a more consistent ground game and a more chunk yard ground game than what we've seen over the past few weeks. It's tough to nitpick right now, folks, with what the Lions are doing. The offense has been explosive. I know this past weekend against the Jets, it wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination. But one thing we've seen lately is that Jared Goff in the quick passing game, that's been working. The ground game, have we seen a 100-yard rusher? We have not. Have we seen big chunk plays from Swift and Williams and some others, Justin Jackson? Not really. But I think the Lions can run the football on Carolina, and I think that's kind of where the Lions are going to try to go tomorrow with this. Now, again, remember, We're talking about 30-degree temperatures down in Charlotte. It's cold all across the country. So it's not going to be, oh, they're going down south to Carolina, it's going to be in the 50s and 60s. No, it's going to be cold. And, there is that narrative out there that Jared Goff struggles on the road and in the cold, but he's won 2 games at the Meadowlands where it's not exactly real toasty this year. And I think that if the ground game gets started, then I think Goff, with play action passing and everything else, can be in a very, very good position. One guy who's been fantastic in kind of keeping Jared Goff clean is Frank Ragnow. And Frank Ragnow is the lone Lions Pro Bowler. I want to get into that coming up next. First, though, let me tell you about our friends. Oh, let me tell you first, Locked On Lions today, I forgot to do this, is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. All right. Also coming up on the show today, I mentioned the Pro Bowl. I got to get into a little bit about Iffy Melifonwu, who's going to get an opportunity to play with Deshaun Elliott out tomorrow. And he's kind of been an unknown for this team. Pretty highly regarded draft pick from a year ago. Hasn't really played much. Is he ready to take that next step? We'll get into that. And we also want to talk about what's going on out in Vegas, because a lot of people are betting on the Lions tomorrow against the Panthers. We're also brought to you by our friends at Turo, the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. That's Turo. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget. You can book an SUV or minivan for a family road trip, a pickup truck for some errands, or even test drive an EV, electric vehicle. Please do this for me. Check out Turo.com. That's Turo.com. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars or going somewhere else and standing in long lines. Find your drive at Turo, Turo.com. And hey, did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where it's legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. If you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, your parents can even tell. So everybody can tell. So what makes you think that law enforcement officers don't know when you're driving high? It's simple. Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high and get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA. All right, so the big news the other day, and we really didn't get to it because yesterday we had the crossover with Julian Council from Locked On Panthers, so check that out right here at Locked On Lions, was the Pro Bowl situation and what took place the other day where the NFL announced who was going to the game. Now, remember, the game is a little bit different this year. It's just like a skills competition. There's not an actual game, and there's not as many players picked. So, for example, there were 3 tackles from the AFC, 3 tackles from the NFC. Usually it was 2 and 2, a backup on each spot, left tackle, right tackle. So they did a little bit differently this year. Frank Ragnow made it for the second time for the Lions, and nobody more well-deserving, nobody more deserving than Frank Ragnow, and he should definitely be there. He's allowed 1 sack in his last 3 seasons. I mean, the guy is an absolute stud. He's one of the best centers in the game, and he, along with Jason Kelce from the Eagles, are the centers going to represent the NFC. So that was a no-brainer. And oh, by the way, did anybody check out the video that the Lions posted when Frank Ragnow found out he was going? He was taken aside by Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Hank Fraley, and 222 was there. Rod Wood standing there, gave him a little brother hug and everything. So good to see 222 Rod Wood Drive is alive and well. But anyway, Frank Ragnow is going. Now, as far as the rest of the players, you could say, wait a minute, what about Penei Sewell? How did he not make it? What about Jonah Jackson? Could you make an argument that Jared Goff should be one of the quarterbacks and not Kirk Cousins? You could make that argument. Amon-Ra St. Brown as well. Those guys that I mentioned, so St. Brown and Penei Sewell were named first alternates, meaning if someone can't go to the game, they would step in. It was similar to what happened last year with Jonah Jackson, who was an alternate, then ended up making it. Penei Sewell, to me, is the biggest snub on this team. He is a dominant right tackle. He's a fantastic player, and there's some really good tackles going to this game. I get it. Tristan Wirfs, Lane Johnson. It's tough. There are only 3 tackles going from the NFC, so it's tough to not pick somebody like Lane or Wirfs or any of those guys. But I think Penei Sewell really deserves to be there, and I hope he gets an opportunity to go if someone backs out. St. Brown, also a first alternate. You talk about wide receivers, guys like CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. Tough to crack that crew, but love seeing that St. Brown was a first alternate. Jared Goff was a third alternate, which I thought was interesting. Jonah Jackson, a fourth alternate. Jamal Williams, a fourth alternate. Huge season in terms of touchdowns. Not sure he's one of the best running backs in the league, but put up the touchdown numbers. Jason Kabinda as fullback, fourth alternate. Khalif Raymond as a return man, fourth alternate. You could make an argument for Khalif and how he's played this year, including last week's punt return for a touchdown from 51 yards out against the Jets. Taylor Decker, a fifth alternate's a joke. It's a joke. Fifth alternate. Taylor Decker's having a monster year. Third alternate, maybe. Second alternate, yes. Fifth alternate, I think is ridiculous. Way too far back. And Aiden Hutchinson was a fifth alternate. Only 2 rookies made the Pro Bowl from the NFC. Tariq Woolen, from the whole NFL. Tariq Woolen from the Seahawks and Sauce Gardner from the Jets. You could make a very good argument for Aiden Hutchinson being higher up than just a fifth alternate. But what does that tell me about the Lions, though? That 9 players were all named alternates. That's tremendous. Tremendous. You got 9 guys that are being recognized by fellow players, by fans, etc., when it comes to going to this game. And what an improvement this organization is undergoing. How much better are they from last year? They won 3 games. They're now sitting at 7 wins with 3 more games to go. But the fact that 9 guys were named alternates, I mean, that's a first for many years, where you could have multiple players once it's all said and done and we figure out who's in the Super Bowl and then guys back out of the game and guys back out of going on the trip. You could have multiple Lions in this game. And I thought Sewell was the biggest snub. St. Brown, to me, deserves it too. And I thought that Jonah Jackson being a fourth alternate behind guys like Landon Dickerson, who I think Jonah Jackson's just as good as, is a little bothersome. Jared Goff, again, Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has put up bigger yardage numbers. I get that. But Goff is having a terrific year. Very good year. And you can make a case for Jared Goff over Kirk Cousins. But 9 Lions being named alternates means they're doing something right in Allen Park. That people are starting to look at this team and see some talent, see some improvements. I mean, Penei Sewell's a big-time player. St. Brown is a big-time player. Frank Ragnow, big-time player. And these other guys that are coming, like Raymond, Decker on this list, Jonah Jackson, being recognized is sweet. And that tells you a lot about where the Lions are headed right now. I think that's a great sign. All right. I want to talk about Vegas and what they think of the Lions of this weekend. Real fast, though, Iffy Melifonwu and CJ Moore are likely going to be splitting these strong safety duties coming up tomorrow when the Lions are in Carolina to play the Panthers. CJ Moore played most of the snaps last week when Deshaun Elliott left the game with a shoulder injury, and Elliott will not play this weekend. And you look up and you go, wait a minute, CJ Moore was cut earlier this year by the Lions, then brought back, and he's more of a special teamer. Melifonwu was, third, fourth round pick, a guy that was highly regarded coming out of Syracuse. You thought was going to be a cornerback, but there was talk of him moving to safety. They do move him to safety. He's been hurt the first 2 years, but you really haven't heard his name much all season. Now his teammates and others are saying he's ready to play this weekend. Number 26 in your white uniform tomorrow is going to be ready, and we're going to get to see what he's about. So they're throwing him possibly into the fire tomorrow. I don't know if he's going to start or if it's CJ Moore or what, but the coaches have indicated it. His teammates have indicated it, that Iffy Melifonwu is going to play tomorrow. And this is a big sort of deal, not because the Panthers are some great team, and this isn't Cam Newton and Steve Smith or even Greg Olsen anymore. But let's see if this kid, what he's got, if he can do it, because he really hasn't played. And, we watched him in the preseason a little bit, and he was a little bit iffy, and then he was always, no pun intended, then he was always hurt. he's been a special teamer, really. They're throwing him into the fire. I mean, you're talking about a secondary that's already lost Tracy Walker this year. Kirby Joseph showed he could play and now has been out there and plays almost every snap. Last week, Moore got the call and played pretty well. PFF had him graded very high, as we talked about on Monday. Melifonwu, let's see. This is going to be a very interesting development tomorrow on if Melifonwu looks like he can play the part and if he's ready to play. By the way, you do dig my Christmas sweater here. You had to do it. Had to do it today for the holiday. All right, what does Vegas think? What do the bettors think? A lot of people on the Lions coming up tomorrow. So let's talk about that coming up next. First, though, we got to tell you about our friends at BetOnline. They're the best. Number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every pro sport, every amateur league, too, as well out there. From pro football, college bowl season, where we are right now, to basketball. And, of course, we just got done with the World Cup. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you find those as well at BetOnline. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it is where the game starts. All right, according to our friends at betonline.net, as we just talked about, your Detroit Lions are favored by 2.5 right now. It's gone back and forth, 2.5, 3 points against the Panthers coming up on Saturday. The Lions, according to BetOnline, have covered their last 7 games. So the last 7 games, they've covered the spread, whether they've been an underdog, a favorite, whatever, the Lions have covered. That's pretty big. Vegas and the sharps, as they say, really are into what the Lions are doing. So much so that according to BetOnline, the 3 most wagered favorites this weekend are the Lions, minus 2.5 at Carolina. 79% of the wagers in Vegas are on Detroit. Think about this for a second. The Lions haven't been road favorites. Well, they were road favorites this past weekend in New York after the announcement of Quinnen Williams and Zach Wilson, or Quinnen Williams and Mike White not playing and Zach Wilson starting. But the opening line was Jets minus 3. This is the first time in a long time that the Lions have been favored on the road in years. All right? And they're favored on the road, minus 2.5. Again, opening line, 2.5. And 79% of the action is on Detroit. The other most wagered favorites are Cincinnati, minus 3 at New England, 75%. And New Orleans at Cleveland, the Browns, minus 3. Browns favored. That is 68% of the money. And again, that's going to be a snow game, and it sounds like it's going to be real windy and cold right there on the shores of Lake Erie. But how about the Lions? This turnaround has been so remarkable and amazing. But the fact that Vegas now, that 79% of the money is on the Lions in this game, of the people betting the Lions and Panthers, is on Detroit. I'm interested in the fact that the line has not moved more in the Lions' favor. Like I said, kind of opened up as Lions minus 3. Now it's at 2.5. But yet, tons of money on Detroit. From 1-6 to 7-7 to the sharps and the bettors taking Detroit, and almost a no-brainer in this game. And again, Carolina is bad. Now, Carolina is playing for something, and they've played hard for their interim coach, Steve Wilkes. There's been a lot of turnover on their staff. They've had the trade with McCaffrey. They've had injuries. This is not a slam dunk. It's not like the Lions are going in there as 5, 6, 7-point favorites. It's 2.5, 3 points. But everybody feels like this is a game the Lions should win. And again, it's a must-win for both teams. Carolina wants to win the NFC South, which is so bad. Tampa Bay, the first place at 6-8. Carolina at 5 wins in 14 games, 5-9, and only a game out of first place. But the Lions got to get this one. So, all right, everybody. Great week here on Locked On Lions. Thanks for making us your first listen, checking us out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, sometimes if you just, where do I get the pod? Just you can go to LockedOnLions.com as well. Lions and Panthers tomorrow, 1 o'clock from a frigid, at least for them, Charlotte, North Carolina. We will talk to you again tomorrow.